So for the entire duration of the webinar, please do keep your microphone and camera on mute if possible. Just helps with a nice clear feed for people. There'll be one Q&A session today, plus opportunities for feedback throughout the webinar. Please ask your questions to Belinda in the chat box located in the top right-hand corner of your screen. You can do this throughout the webinar. If we run out of time for questions, we will make a note of your question and email you privately with the answer after the webinar. We will also be sending out a recording of today's webinar, which will also be available on our website. If you haven't already done so, please do take a moment to do the quick survey. The link to this is in the chat box, which is located in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and it will help Belinda with her presentation today. So a few things about Business Link Pacific. If you're new to our network, or maybe even if you've just been with us for a while, here's a quick refresher of what we are all about. So we are a New Zealand government-funded private sector development initiative delivered by DT Global. We currently work in 6 countries: Samoa, Fiji, Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea, and more recently the Solomon Islands and the Cook Islands. We work in partnership with the Chambers of Commerce, financial institutions, and the private sector to develop a business advisory service provider network in the Pacific region that improves the access of business services to growing SMEs. We do this by offering 3 main services. We have a business health check, which helps businesses identify where there might be gaps in their business that could benefit from business advice. We have also just released the online business continuity planner, which is a similar tool to the business health check focused on business continuity planning. We have a searchable database of over 90 BLP approved business advisors. All of our advisors go through a quality assurance process to ensure they are reliable and qualified. We offer the BLP subsidy scheme, which helps growing businesses gain access to quality business advice and support at a subsidized rate from our business advisors, a very worthwhile investment. Since 2018, we have supported Pacific Island businesses in many ways. We have connected 500 growing businesses with BLP approved advisors. Through this, we've created 222 new jobs, 49% of which are filled by women. We have completed 555 subsidy projects, and 128 of these were covered in total 100% by our COVID-19 subsidy support package. 1,610 business health checks and continuity planners have been completed, and our in-country representatives have completed 164 business diagnostics. For more information about the services that we offer, please visit businesslinkpacific.com. Our webinar presenter today is Belinda Botha, owner of Side Dive Munda and Solomon Islands Discovery Cruises. Belinda is a dual South African and Canadian citizen and has been a resident in the Solomon Islands for 7 years. She is an instructor certifier for Scuba Schools International and has over 20 years in international human resources consulting experience. She has 2 master's degrees, one in HR management and one in industrial psychology. And Side Dive Munda has just recently started offering virtual COVID-19 human capital consulting services in the tourism and dive sectors for South Pacific nations. And they are now BLP quality approved business advisors in our network. Belinda is here today to present business advice and support on the topic of navigating through the COVID-19 storm. Belinda, welcome. Belinda, you just have to unmute your microphone.
That's better. Sorry about that. Good day, everybody. Very nice to see everybody here. I can see all the pictures pop up. It's fantastic to be here today. Thank you very much, Anusha. Shall I start my presentation?
Yes, go for it.
Can you guys just give me a heads up that you are able to see my screen that is being shared?
Yes, all good.
Excellent. Good day, all my friends and South Pacific neighbors and One Talks. It is absolutely fabulous to be with you here today. This is a topic that is particularly near and dear to my heart. As you all know, I have a business several businesses in the South Pacific, and it's also a topic of a new research proposal as I'm embarking on a PhD degree, and I think COVID-19 is such an interesting phenomenon. So very near and dear to my heart. Thank you for joining. We will be talking through how to navigate through the COVID-19 storm. Specifically, we'll be looking at the 10 essential Ps, those that I find very important and also very useful for specific guidance through this storm. We're going to zoom in a little bit more on tourism, but certainly this is hopefully going to be beneficial for all businesses. We'll be sharing some wonderful client stories of those clients that I have worked with that has really started to think outside of the historical tourism box, and we'll share their success stories. Anusha, thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. I'm not going to share anything more. You guys are welcome to see more information about what I'm currently doing, as well as my business and specifically the consulting piece in the bio. So just a very quick intro to look at what we'll be covering today. I'm not going to go through the entire outline, but we'll look initially at some numbers, some statistics, to unpack the COVID-19 scenario for us in the Pacific just a little bit more. We'll also look then very intensely at the 10 Ps, and this is where we'll share some client success story. And I want to welcome my clients here, specifically from Axel from Wellwaters Tonga, Sharon from Friendly Islands Kayak Company, and then also Jenny from PNG Highlands Adventures. The 10 Ps, just very quickly, we'll be looking at positivity, perspective, planning, pragmatic, proactive, prioritize, people, persistence, possibility, and partnerships. We'll also check in on some very specific ideas that you can share. We may not have time for it today, but we'll see how the presentation goes. Otherwise, please join me for a follow-up presentation as we continue to further unpack what COVID-19 presents to us as we continue on this journey. Let me start off with a quote, and you'll see some really interesting quotes throughout the presentation. For me, those are always very inspiring, and it helps keep us focused and also find the passion that we need to be able to tackle these topics quite intensely. Don't try to sail your ship now by how the wind is going to be in 3 days. You have to sail with the winds as they are now. So what does the outlook tell us? If you are like me and quite interested in hearing more and understanding what's continuing to change all the time, let's look at the outlook. COVID-19 is here to stay. It is the way we live now. It is fluid. Much remains unknown. So how do we balance it all? It's a health crisis. It is an economic crisis. It is a social well-being crisis. And it's also a human crisis, very much human rights. Doing business, strategizing, planning, and operating in the old way, using traditional methodologies and models, although proven to be very successful pre-COVID, may now become obsolete in the post-COVID world. We have to adapt and think outside of the tourism box as to reframe the future of travel now. Tourism is a guaranteed safe harbor no more. We will have to change in order to cope. Tourism will return. I'm sure about that when the time is right, but it will look very different for all of us. Tourism will, however, continue to be an experience. And this is specifically where the opportunity lies for us. This is a new normal. People call it a black swan event. It's unprecedented times. But we find hope and inspiration as SMEs in the Pacific by looking at campaigns like We're All in This Together and Safe Travels. The essential 10 Ps are here to help us navigate the storm so that we can all together build back better. We all may be sick and tired of hearing about the COVID-19 crisis. I know it's wherever you look, that's where the crisis is. But I think it is a reality, and we have to remember that this thing is barely getting started. It took 3 months for global cases to reach 1 million. The last million came in 1 week. Doesn't matter how it started or where it started. It matters only that this is our new reality, and we need to be ready to deal with this. So let's just further unpack a bit more in terms of the numbers. This slide really, for me, encapsulates what it means for us as the tourism sector, whether we're in the Pacific or across the world. Very important just to quickly highlight a few things here. There are 3 case scenarios. Most of us now know that scenario 1, which would see about a 58% decline in international tourism. We kind of know that that doesn't really look like a possibility anymore. We know that we're already past, in most cases, scenario 1. If you look at scenario 2, the green line, we see about a decline of 70%, which is a possibility in some regions, but it looks more and more like we'll see scenario 3 play out, especially for us in the Pacific. We're looking about 80% decline in international tourist arrivals. The timeline for lifting restrictions here will make a very big difference. One thing that these figures make clear is that whenever restrictions are eased or the lockdowns end, large impacts are already now unavoidable. Some other facts is we know that between 100 and 120 million jobs in tourism are at risk. I saw an interesting statistics a couple of days ago by Bloomberg, as they were predicting that 1/4 of businesses in the Pacific will not be able to weather this COVID-19 storm. And they are predicting that the impact of COVID-19 will cost the economy globally $2.7 trillion. Yes, that's trillion with a T, a decline of about 3% of GDP this year. Tourism specifically represents about 10% of global GDP. So from those numbers, we need to find inspiration, and we need to look at what is important for us to remember. Before we start though, let's see how you guys did. Anusha, are you there? Do you mind please sharing with us the feedback results of the welcome poll?
Sure, I'm here. So thank you everyone for filling in the survey that we put out this this morning, and on social media as well. So we've got 17 responses so far, Belinda. We've got people from all over the Pacific: Fiji, Samoa, Papua New Guinea. We don't have anyone from the Solomons today. We have some people from New Zealand and Vanuatu as well. We've got a huge range of people from all over different sectors as well: accounting, business advisory and consulting, dive tourism, international development, amongst others. And the big question, do you have all the tools, resources, support you need, business and personal, to successfully navigate through the COVID-19 storm? 64.7% have said, I only have some, and 35.3% have said, yes, I have all.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Anusha, for that. And thank you also for everybody that participated in the welcome poll. That is really interesting, and it makes so much more sense that at the end we're going to ask you to please share your ideas on what you used and what you did during this COVID-19 crisis to be able to weather the storm. I think a large percentage of you said you have all the tools and resources you need, so we would love to hear from you. It's also really good to know that most of you, the remainder, have some of the information that you need and some of the tools and resources. That's excellent, and it makes sense because we are 3-4 months down the line already. So I'm sure many of the things that we will talk about today, you may have already thought about, you may have already implemented in some way, shape, or form in your SME. The purpose of today is continuing to reiterate what remains important, share new ideas, but also share with you success stories within the Pacific. So thank you for doing the poll for us. Thanks, Anusha, for the feedback. We must free ourselves of the hope that the sea will ever rest. We must learn to sail in high winds. And that brings us to a few more global observations. And hopefully these will bring you up to speed with what's happening out there at the moment. Let's look at the economy as a start. There is, of course, the risk of the false economy, shadow or zombie jobs. What's going to happen after September? For many countries, the deadline remains September in terms of the wage system support to their citizens coming to an end. And how is that going to affect the world pretty much? How will it affect us in the Pacific when we see some of our neighbors, the countries that we depend on for tourists, when those wage subsidy schemes come to an end? How will that impact us? Aviation and hospitality recovery timelines differs across countries. This is quite an interesting one because we will see a stage return to some sort of normality. Everything won't happen at the same time. The outlook remains quite grim, unfortunately, for the aviation industry. For example, The Economist a couple of days ago just shared the new statistics with us where they were saying Airbus predicts air travel will most likely only return to pre-COVID levels around 2023 to 2025. Those numbers is quite daunting because it's still quite a few years off. So it becomes really important for us to be able to have the tools and resources to deal with this crisis because it is going to continue. Another really big discussion point for us in the Pacific has certainly been from the start, the travel bubbles. A new world of air bridges, free travel zones, the Corona corridors, whichever name you want to use. It is really interesting, and this just quite recently, yesterday, we saw Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, talking about the travel bubble for us in the Pacific is quite a way off, as we see Australia and New Zealand specifically challenged and continue to work through some of the after effects and some of the continuous cases that is evolving through the COVID-19 crisis. The reality is it's unprecedented. This is an unprecedented global collapse of travel. It's a global collapse. We see the Trans-Tasman and the Pacific bubble not immediately likely. Most of us rely, as I've mentioned earlier, heavily on the Australian and New Zealand markets. While we know that those are not specifically coming back to pre-COVID travel levels. But we cannot not sail. We have to focus on finding solutions and continuing to weather the storm. What's the Pacific picture? What does it look like for us? We know that we are different, good and bad. There is no little domestic market for some of us. Some of our friends in Papua New Guinea and Fiji could perhaps see a bigger percentage of their domestic market being able to utilize some of the operations and services and products, but we see in many other countries that that will not be an option for us. We know that there in most of the Pacific nations there is some assistance, but not enough. So we really do need to look at this as a challenge for us. I will refer throughout the presentation to some excellent resources and some previous webinars that has been done by Business Link Pacific in conjunction with some of the business advisors. So the names of the webinars are throughout the presentation. So please take some time afterwards and access them and go and have a look at them. Not just the webinars, but also the podcasts. They are really super, super resourceful. But we also know the Pacific is resilient and we are blessed with an abundance of natural resources, traditional and custom cultures that keeps our people together and motivate us during times of crises, if we look back at the history of what we have to deal with in the Pacific. We'll continue with some final observations. This is quite interesting. What does the global traveler trends looks like? These are the most recent up-to-date trends that I think is quite important for us to look at. When the traveler does travel again, safety, health and hygiene is going to be first. Here, I think it is absolutely critical to become a COVID-19 responsible operator. And this, so by the way, is something that I will cover off in a follow-up webinar, because this is also a passion of mine. How do we work with individual small, medium-sized enterprises? How do we help you to become COVID-19 responsible? What are the marketing strategies? What are the things that you need to do within your organization to help you prepare and also to help you communicate that you are a COVID-19 responsible operator to your clients? Flexibility, this is critical for the traveler moving forward. Booking terms and conditions as well as cancellation policies. Most of this you probably have already done, but it is going to continue to be important. And I want to reiterate here, it doesn't matter if you've done some of these things already. The crisis is continuing. We are learning every day about how the virus is evolving. We are learning every day about how countries are responding. So it does mean that we have to look at our business and adjust and also change your approach all the time. It's really important. We can't sit back and say, oh, we've now done what we needed to do to respond initially, but we need to continue to look at how we need to adapt. Value for money, this is going to be really important, and there's lots of different schools of thinking out there. Value for money doesn't necessarily mean the cheapest, but it does mean that the traveler will be looking at value for what they are paying for. Interestingly enough here, many people think that the traveler will pay more, but they will pay more for what is needed and what's relevant moving forward. For example, that extra space on the boat or that extra middle seat on a flight that's open. Travelers will be able to afford that or pay for that. However, travel will become more expensive. So that means the pool of travelers may get smaller, at least initially. We heard that the aviation industry is predicting that initially flights will be cheaper, but after that, we're looking at, in some cases, up to a 30% spike longer to medium term. So interesting thing to look at. It's also interesting, it looks like luxury options may become a bit more affordable. So there's one good thing coming out of this for us. There's also a big move towards the green transition. We've heard it. We've worked on this, many of us as operators, for so many years. It may be a positive thing that will come out here is the traveler on the other side is going to look at using operators that has a clear preference towards sustainability and looking at the environment as well. The digital transformation, of course. I mean, I believe that the fourth industrial revolution has just been super sped up by the COVID-19 crisis. It's really adapt or die. If you're not in the digital game, I am sorry, but you will be left behind. BLP has done fantastic webinars on this topic, so please feel free to go and check them out. Again, the names and the links are clear for us here to see. The next trend that we will see is state and cultural behavioral changes. The state or the governments will start playing a different role. How the government responds and how the people feel about that is going to become quite interesting. And we'll see some real big cultural and behavioral changes coming up. So we may at least initially lose the mature traveler. This is quite interesting because we know that those groups of travelers may initially be a bit more hesitant to travel. The business and group travel may initially not be so keen on doing group travel anymore. We'll see school trips taking a longer time to recover. The cruise sector, well, that remains an entire different topic, but we know that they will take some time to recover. And interestingly enough, predictions are for religious and wedding travel that may initially also not be booming like before. A couple of barriers maybe to just end off this section before we start unpacking the P's and we listen to some wonderful client stories. Quarantine requirements and insurance protocols. This is important because I think we know that the big barrier for travelers to feel comfortable and confident is they would want to see insurance starting to happen for travel, whether it's guaranteed insurance on flights being cancelled or moved. That will be important for the traveler moving forward. And also politics. For us in the Pacific, we are not immune, and we know very much how big a part politics does play in our local economies and also in the regional economy. So politics will continue to play quite an important part, and that may become barrier in terms of how long countries take to open up again for travel. And then second and third waves, how does the world deal with it? How does our key travel markets, Australia and New Zealand market for one reason, how will they respond and deal with that? I don't need to elaborate any further. What we're seeing in Melbourne at the moment and what we're seeing in New Zealand, those will actually impact us quite heavily. The confidence in the destinations to keep travelers safe is really important. And here as a region, as countries within the Pacific, it's quite important. What message do we send out and how ready are we? It comes back to being a COVID-19 responsible operator. So my question to you is, are we really ready? On that note, let's start unpacking the 10 Ps. The pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the realist adjusts the sails. So let's start unpacking the 10 Ps. The first two is positivity and perspective. Positivity. I think it's really important to be realistic, but positive. Knowledge really here is critical. I think it's important to be positive, but also understand that you have to be realistic and deal with what is happening in the environment around you at this time. It's interesting what you have done personally, what routines have you kept during lockdown, what routines have you kept during working from home cycles? How did you stay positive? I mean, how did you deal with that? How are you dealing with social distancing? There is always hope and inspiration. We just need to find it. Your personal well-being and positive psychological responses to COVID-19 here for me is critical. And it also comes back again to how you as an SME support your people, your employees in a positive manner. Again, I want to refer back to the workplace health and well-being strategy, which becomes important. I loved what Portugal did here in terms of positivity. Their tourism slogan was can't stop Portugal before, and it's now gone to can't stop hope. How powerful is that, hey? How do you find perspective? Seeing the bigger picture, having a bird's eye view here is really important. I think it's interesting because if you don't look at the big picture here when it comes to COVID and you don't see the impact that this has globally, it will be important for you to remember that, but also for you to see how it is impacting you as an SME. Intelligence, staying informed and doing research. This is basically what you're doing. What you're doing right now is you are staying informed and you are listening and you are trying to do research and make sure that you can respond to this crisis. Some other ideas here is partnerships. It was really important what I saw was happening in Asia at the moment. It was quite interesting what they did. They looked at this from a big picture perspective. And they formed a partnership during the lockdown and closed borders between the car rental companies and the taxis. And they looked at how they can assist with the restaurant sector, hospitality, to partner to do home deliveries instead of each sector being completely in lockdown and not being able to respond. They formed partnerships and really solved a crisis, and people were able to do home deliveries. The taxi drivers and the car rental companies was able to redeploy their fleet, which was quite interesting. Knowing the trends, global responses, and recommendations gives your SME a competitive advantage. This is really important because if you are a COVID-19 responsible operator, you are resilient, you can bounce back. It makes your business even more competitive. Make this your business. If it wasn't before and you didn't really care too much about the crisis or how you responded or how the region responded, make it your business now, because I think this will really give you a competitive edge. And also share your readiness with your customers. People are looking for stories. People are looking for positivity and perspective. People are looking for how countries, regions, and operators are dealing with this. So I think it's quite good to share the stories. Whenever your preparations for the sea are poor, the sea worms its way and finds the problems. How true is that? The act of the sailor is to leave nothing by chance. And that's why planning is probably one of the most important P's. This is a lot of information to unpack here, but we'll work through them to show you how this P is actually really important. There is nothing like a pandemic to bring the importance of adaptive and innovative business continuity planning into stark focus. Here, I want to reiterate, for me, it's really important that you have to rethink continuously. It doesn't mean if you've done your strategic business plan 3 months ago and anticipated the best case scenario, hopefully that we'll start seeing international travel opening up now. Well, guess what? It is not. For us in the Pacific, it will be quite some time still. So you have to rethink strategic planning. You have to continually adapt. The same goes for your business plan. Hopefully you have done a business plan for the next year. You've revisited your business plan to really deal with the COVID-19 crisis and have a specific zoom in and focus on that. Again, for our participants, there are wonderful webinars already done on these topics. I'm not going to go through the information again. You can access them. Essential strategic planning was done. Specifically, there is a business plan checklist that is absolutely excellent resources for you to access. So please go ahead and do that. Number 3, for me, it's really important to look at a recovery plan and have a recovery plan that's specifically COVID-19 focused, but also fluid. Our recovery plan has to change. We are still currently in the response phase in the Pacific. Many other nations are already starting to move through recovery phase. But for us, we are still in response, but it is critical for us to look at recovery. And again, here I want to reiterate, for me, it is really important that that plan is a part of your weekly meetings. You look at that and see how do you need to change, because this crisis is fluid, it changes all the time. And as it changes, we have to adapt how we think of marketing, how we think of running our business, how do we think about markets, how the markets respond. So it's critical to be fluid. Again, this is something that I will cover a bit more in a future webinar, or you can ask us to help your recovery plan formulation already. Focus on finance planning. This is critical. I mean, if you haven't done this already, it has to happen. There is, again, excellent resources through BLP to assist you. We looked at the cash flow. We know that cash is king at this moment. How do you take all your expenses down to the bare bones expenses? How do you focus only on what absolutely has to happen right now? Short-term survival is now turning to medium-term survival as borders remain closed. We probably focused on immediate crisis management and how can you plan financially around that, but we're now seeing that this is starting to become a bit longer, so we have to adjust. Compiling a mental health strategy for me is really important. I think I mentioned right in the beginning that we know the social crisis, the human crisis here, is what's going to become more and more evident as this pandemic evolves further, and how we respond personally, how we feel personally is going to become much more important to focus on. And as a business owner, looking at your employees, this is really important. And formulating a strategy to provide the resources and assistance is a major opportunity for us. But we need to know that this will also be quite challenging, because our people will go through lots of change and emotional distress. We know that during times of pandemic and crises like this, we have spiking numbers of depression, we have anxiety, stress, burnout, dealing with isolation. All these things will become important, and we need to have an holistic approach to this. Emergency communication plans, do you have one? Are you adjusting it as you get more information? So planning is very important. Renegotiate everything, especially now that the virus is evolving and staying longer. Interesting, one specific example which I really liked was giving hotel guests, if you're in the hospitality sector and you have a hotel or a small guest house, or even if you're in the travel wholesale sector, providing a risk register to complete, to track your guests' exposure prior to arrival, to keep everybody safe, is going to be quite interesting. One of the big hotel groups has started to introduce that, and it creates confidence in the destination and also provides more information that this operator is a COVID-19 responsible operator. So think about those things to help keep your business focused and also in the eyes of your customers. Let's move on. We're getting close to our first client story. I'm not afraid of storms, for I'm learning how to sail my ship. However bad the storm you are in, there is still sun somewhere on the horizon. And this leads us very nicely to our first client success story, being PRAGMATIC. And we will hear more about Sharon's story, where she really created an interesting cash flow solution by getting a cash injection investor on board her ship. We worked with Sharon quite extensively in helping her through this crisis, and that was one of the outcomes that was achieved. So we're going to hear her story. Inusha, if you are there, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, if that's okay with you, and I would like for you, please, to show us the video that Sharon and I did just before this webinar.
Yes, no worries. I'll do that for you now.
Thank you.
You'll just have to mute your microphone, Belinda.
To share what I personally and professionally have undergone and am still undergoing, and I hope that what I have to share with everyone who's listening will motivate them and be an inspiration for them, and hopefully also offer some practical support towards solutions. So I engaged in a problem-solving process with my business coach, Belinda, towards the goal of basically saving my business from bankruptcy. I know we're all in the same COVID-19 boat, and it's really tough. We've all experienced many emotions and despair, but at the end of the day, we've got to fight to survive. And to that end, I started thinking to myself, okay, what are my most pressing problems? I identified that as being a zero cash flow, zero revenue, a finite cash reserve that was insufficient to meet our fixed overhead costs for more than, say, 5 to 6 months. That's Friendly Islands Kayak Company's dilemma. And so when I realized very quickly that those costs could not be sustained indefinitely, I then decided that I needed to come up with some solutions. And so with Belinda, I brainstormed my options. I had to be creative. I didn't rule out anything. I considered bankruptcy as the worst case scenario. I considered another option as being a fire sale of assets and walk away, cut my losses. I'm sure others have thought of that too. I didn't like either of those options, obviously. They weren't options for me. I'm a fighter. And so I decided, with Belinda's support, on the creative idea of a cash injection. And so I considered a bank loan, but given the precariousness and fragility of the situation and the uncertainty of the future, I thought, no, I don't want to take on a bank loan that I may not be able to repay. So what I did was I reached out to select interested investors to partner with me and inject some capital, some cash basically, to keep the lights on, to pay for the fixed overhead costs for the next, say, 6 to 8, 9 months. And I was happy with that idea. So then I had to, after weighing the pros and cons of each option and deciding on that plan, I then needed to create a plan of action. And so as I say, I reached out to hand-picked individuals, and bingo, I had a few interested parties. It was a bit of a roller coaster ride, and still is, insofar as somebody would say, yes, I'm interested, and then they'd drop out, and then I'd go back to the drawing board and kept fighting and chose another individual, and up they would pop. Currently, I have 2 interested parties, and fingers crossed. Yeah, we don't know what the outcome is, that or will be, but hey, you know, this, as I say, is creative thinking on the spot. And on that note, it's important through this process to be adaptive, to be resilient, to move with the times. As we all know, the COVID-19 situation is evolving and very fluid. So we need to be on the mark every step of the way, reviewing constantly our plan of action. Adaptive, proactive, resilient, and alert. So then the next step is to carry out this plan. That's the hardest part with the problem-solving process, because there's always a temptation to second guess yourself, to think, oh my gosh, I don't know if this is the right course of action. The most important thing is to barge ahead with it. Move forward, don't look back. Trust yourself, trust your judgment, and above all else, trust your instinct. And that's where Belinda helped me, because I had lots of people in the background, friends, family, accountants, lawyers, agents saying, oh, no, don't do that. But at the end of the day, I came back to Belinda and said, hey, I did it. I defied everybody's advice and I did it. And Belinda said, you followed your instinct and look at the outcome. You did the right thing. So finally, I don't have the outcome yet, but when it comes, I will assess that and decide whether it was the desired outcome or a different outcome. And at the end of the day, if it wasn't the desired outcome, then I'm going to rework this problem-solving process and go back to square one and step one. That's all I can really do.
Belinda, microphone.
My apologies. Thank you, Sharon, for that wonderful story. And Anusha, thank you also for sharing. I'm going to continue the presentation. And let me just go back right into the slide. We're going to continue on to our next slide. Can I just confirm that everybody can see my presentation again?
Yeah, all good.
Wonderful. It is not the ship so much as the skillful sailing that assures the prosperous voyage. This brings us right to being proactive. And here again, I'm going to ask Anusha to help us quickly by sharing Axel's story. Axel joins us from Whale Waters, Tonga. And really what he did is he looked at a change of career to ride out the cash flow crisis wave successfully. So here, adaptability, flexibility, a can-do attitude. And while I'm stopping and sharing my screen, I'm going to ask Anusha to join in, but I'll talk about the circle of no control, acknowledging that there are some things that you can do and there are some things that you can't do, and realizing that you need to focus on what you have control over and continue to just make sure that you address that. And I think we're ready for Axel's story. Thanks, Anusha.
Well, thanks for being here and inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you as well. Thank you. Yeah, the business in Tonga is a dive business, and unfortunately we cannot travel like you, so we have no income. And I'm an SSI scuba dive instructor like you. I met you the first time on a webinar, Proactive from SSI. And then you mentioned that you are helping businesses in the South Pacific. So, and straight away typed in, what's your email? And contacted you after the meeting straight away and said, okay, Belinda, you're not just a pretty face. Let me know basically how you can help me. I think the name Wonder Woman was there somewhere in there, because Sam was saying something along the line. Anyhow, it was really, really important that at that particular moment we got information and someone who had the confidentiality behind it to actually run our situation past. And it was quite easy for me to work with you in the business level, because you're a scuba dive instructor in the same situation, exiled at the moment. So we had a fantastic initial business solution success in identifying that our businesses need to be more spoiled, and we need to do everything mostly to save our assets over there, because we don't know how long this is going, that we cannot travel. In addition to that, we identified that part and parcel of my business plan in Tonga was actually business coaching or personal development coaching, which you picked up on very quickly. And yeah, we unpacked that. So this is maybe a new career path, and one way or the other. And yeah, I think it was fairly early in the path, actually, 2 months ago, I straight away researched what I can do, and I signed up with Life in Balance, YB12. And just last weekend, I've been accredited to present the YB12 Classic and Mensana personal development program. So I'm a coach now. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not waiting for rain, as I always say, because in Australia we don't have any rain. So I need to make things happening when the opportunity is there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anusha, for sharing, helping me share Axel's story. It was great to see Axel sharing his experience in a career redirection, and how did he go from needing to put his dive business on hold for a little bit and looking at other opportunities. I do look at the time, and I know that we'll be going over a few minutes, probably 10 minutes or so longer than originally anticipated. I do apologize, and I also realize we started the presentation a little late, so my apologies. Please do be assured that this is going to be recorded. So if you need to leave, not a problem. We will not be offended. Please access the presentation again and look at the pieces that you missed, and we would love to hear your feedback on that as well. So please just a heads up on that. We continue with the 10 Ps. Life's roughest storms prove the strength of our anchors. A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. As we continue with the 10 Ps, prioritizing, looking at people, and persistence as an individual focus. Prioritize. First things first, be brutal in your priorities. I like to look at the marketing plan, review that on a month-to-month basis, not just on a quarterly basis or even an annual basis during this time. Because as the information changes and our response changes, we need to then make sure that our marketing plan and our specific advertising promotions talks to the way that the crisis is evolving and how are you responding. So you have to prioritize first things first. Product is critical, and I was contemplating whether product will become our 11th P, but I thought it kind of slots in nicely under prioritize. You have to constantly review and develop your product. Specific ideas here is where people literally handed. They were prioritizing the first thing first. They handed the keys back to their landlord saying, I'm really sorry, you don't necessarily can, or you're not in a position to work with me. I'm going to be working from home. My team is going to be working from home. Thank you very much. Here's the key back. Be brutal in priority. Sometimes it's not necessarily the most, the nicest outcome, but still you need to protect your business and your income. I liked to think of the critical questions here. I asked my own business and myself, and I do this very often with the clients that I work with. What do you stop? What do you start? And what do you continue? There's some really cool information at the end of the presentation that you can access afterwards that really unpacks this a bit further in terms of products. What product is still relevant? What do I start now during this crisis? What opportunities is there? And what can I continue still with? That brings us to the next P, which is people. For me, people always first. People are our most important asset and resource. How do we support not only our staff, but also how do we communicate and engage with our guests, our partners, our stakeholders, our wholesale operators? How do we continue to communicate and stay engaged and stay top of mind? This is where I think crisis leadership comes in really important. We know that there are various leadership styles. We know we all have to wear different hats as a leader, but during a crisis, it really shows what your true colors are and how resilient you are as a leader. Again, I share some interesting tidbits on this specific topic in terms of crisis leadership right at the end of the presentation. So feel free to access this later on in your own time when you receive the link to the webinar. Persistence, and persistence goes hand in hand here for sure with patience, and patience probably could have been the 12th P, but I think it comes really and fits in quite nicely with persistence. Your resilience, survival of the fittest, work towards a new equilibrium, reassess, reimagine, and reinvent all the time. And this is where I think change and transformational management becomes important, and being inspiring and continuously communicate that inspiration in stories. How did you adapt to the COVID-19 challenges and changes? Patience means taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It happens to all of us during this crisis. This is a curveball that none of us anticipated and expected. Even the best countries in the world were spectacularly unprepared for this. But we have to persist, we have to endure, we have to have patience, and we have to continue doing what we are doing. Some cool ideas here that I've seen operators and countries really use in terms of responding to this is book now, travel later campaign, more space for no extra cost. This is really interesting approach that's taken by some operators that does trips off boats. Guess what? You get an extra space. There's more room on the boat. You don't have to pay for it. They cover the social distancing requirements, but they also market and promote their product in a way that is in a positive outcome for the traveler. Also, the same with the rooms, restaurants, aviation. You can use the same angle. Fiji has very successfully launched the Pay Now, Stay Later campaign, and we all loved the billionaires bubble that they have done. That's really quite creative. I hope that they see many good returns on that. Waves are not measured in feet or inches. They are measured in increments of fear. Without patience, a sailor I would never be. That brings us to possibility. What a powerful, powerful concept. Without seeing possibility through this crisis, we will not be able to conquer our fear and face our fears. Again, we would like to share our last client's story here, and this is from the beautiful Jenny from Papua New Guinea Highlands Adventures. And again, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'm going to please ask Anusha just to help us with sharing Jenny's story.
The business started in 2008, and our main market was USA, UK, Australia, and Europe. And the BLP coaching has been an eye-opener for women SME like me to change all my business plans, strategic plans, cash flow plans, and make a U-turn on other income-generating opportunity to step on and sustain my operational costs, liabilities, and other stuff that I need to do in order to bounce back maybe in 2021, June to September month. And yeah, BLP coaching with you was very high and intensive for me. Like I did learn a lot how to turn back and look at other opportunities to sustain myself in other business activity to generate income until the tourism business bounces back. So yeah, I think this coaching is needed by most SMEs, especially women in Papua New Guinea, to get coaching, because our business is mostly, we are doing cultural team, like saving culture, management skills, accounting, how to keep our books, record, and then now it comes onto the IT system. We need to know the platforms, how to do our sales on Facebook, Instagram, other digital workshops that is needed. And I see that this is the coachings that we get from BLP is excellent, and I really learned a lot, and I am going forward after the COVID-19. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Anusha. It was such an interesting experience working with Jenny from Papua New Guinea. Jenny was very creative. We looked at other opportunities for her, specifically as her business in the tourism sector obviously was brought to a complete standstill. And she looked at starting another business in a different thriving sector. She started a Nicodoa liquor distributors, which was a fabulous opportunity for her to start a new business, but also then be able to sustain the tourism business with income that's generated through other means. I think we'll leave this for our next session, but if you guys can, think about ideas. What did you implement as operator in the Pacific to help you weather the COVID-19 storm? Please share your thoughts with us now via chat box, or send us an email afterwards, because I'll incorporate that into the follow-up webinar as we continue to unpack the COVID-19 storm further. Let's wrap up. A ship is safe in harbour, but that is not what ships are for. I would like to look at the last 10p, which is indicating here the importance of partnerships. Collaboration, connection, and communication in essence. And we'll show you a couple of nice ideas that some of the operators implemented. Collaboration, globalism, we're all in this together, all together now. Those are all things that you see being communicated across the tourism sector. An incredible example here is how the global scientists and doctors and everybody in the medical industry has really collaborated and worked together to help find a COVID-19 vaccine. It doesn't matter whether you believe in one or not, it's not the point of the discussion here, but it's just illustrating here how important collaboration is. Literally, these guys have a WhatsApp group and they are sharing with each other how what they have discovered and how the whole process is evolving. I thought that was quite a wonderful example of how during this time of crisis people are collaborating, connecting, coordinating connections within the region, the country, and the South Pacific here. It's so important for us to stand together as a region, as a country, as operators within a specific within the Pacific. Unconditionally, and this is so important, support your destination recovery. We all have tourism boards, we all have departments of tourism within our countries and even across the region, for example, the South Pacific Tourism Organization. If the destination, and in this case our region, succeeds, you and I will succeed. Global communication and global competition on the other side is going to be fierce. We will not just compete, unfortunately, against each other, but we will be competing with other destinations, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, the Caribbean. How we now support our brand, destination branding, and how we support the countries and our region is going to be really important, and it will help us see a positive outcome on the other side. Share regional and local stories via all communication channels. The actions now will have a strong impact later. I want to share a story here, and I also want to caution us. I think we need to be careful exactly how we promote and sell. If we come in too strong and too heavy, I think it can be seen as insensitive and be misunderstood. Remember, guys, the global crisis is not over. There are many, many countries. Some of us have the USA as one of our major markets, and these guys are still struggling. I mean, we see Africa struggling. We see South America really struggling with the crisis. It's not over yet. Be careful how you send and what messages you sent out. I'll very quickly use an example here of my own business, where when the COVID-19 crisis started, I made a very public post on all social media mediums when I said we will be respecting and keeping our social distancing, and we'll be respecting the crisis, and we will not be posting for 2 months. I think it really worked well for us because people understood that this is not about the next selfie. It's not about marketing or promoting or trying to sell something. Later on, of course, we slowly started to implement other ideas in terms of staying safe and then doing some stuff that you can do at home, virtual training. So the message changed later on, but initially we took a 2-month hiatus and we didn't post anything, and we really supported the campaigns that's out there about stay at home, stay safe. And I think our guests and our people and our partners really appreciated this. So just a word of caution. I think we will not check in on the small, medium enterprise ideas. We're just running out of time. So I would like for us, please share your ideas in the chat box, and we will use that as an opening slide when we do the follow-up COVID-19 presentation. So by the way, for those of you that's interested to hear how we're evolving, I will have that presentation on the 6th of August. So please join me. Some quick question and answer session here. If I can maybe ask Anusha and the team, if there was any questions that I can take a few minutes to answer right now, maybe a couple would be nice.
Thanks, Belinda. This has been really, really great. So we have a question from Amrita. She says, how is a recovery plan different from a business continuity plan? As I understand, the business continuity plan is a plan of recovery from a disaster such as COVID-19.
Absolutely. And I think you are 100% right. I think the way that I see the recovery plan for me also focuses a bit more shorter term. And it can be, as you look at a business continuity plan, it really looks at the next 3 to 6 months. But for me, the recovery plan is immediate response in terms of the crisis that we are managing. Very, very often they are seen as complementing each other, and your business continuity plan can also include your recovery plan. And there is a difference, but it's also in terms of the time that you respond to the two, and again, in how much detail you get in and get through it. It doesn't matter if your recovery is part of your continuity plan or your continuity plan is part of your recovery plan. I think for me, the critical part here is looking at your the timeline and also the COVID-19 specific response to that recovery. And finally, understanding for me that it needs to be adjusted and amended all the time. And this is where I think a business continuity maybe have a bit of a longer vision, where the recovery plan is, okay, well, this is what we know from COVID-19. The bubble is not happening this month as we anticipated. How do we recover now? What do we do? So that would be how I see that. Thank you for the questions, by the way.
Thanks, Belinda. In your opinion, what's the most important P of them all?
Wow, wonderful question. I think positivity is probably the most important one, because if we don't have the right attitude and we are not seeing, we're not being positive, we will not see possibility.
Yeah, I totally agree. If anyone else has any more questions for Belinda, please type them in the chat box now. Belinda will be presenting a second webinar for us, like she mentioned, on the 6th of August, which will be carrying on from some of the points that she made today. She did a very long presentation for us in preparation for this, and there's so much more she wants to say. So I hope you can join us on the 6th of August. Another question, perhaps Belinda, you want to give us a quick overview, of your resources that you'd like to share with us.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to quickly summarize, and then I'll just show you the slide of the resources as well. So in closing, there is a new normal out there. Yes, it's challenging for all of us. And yes, we do not know how it will look on the other side, but we know it will be different. We have to adapt, be creative, and think outside of the tourism box. We know when this is under control, people will travel again. It will be different, but they will. There is always hope and possibility and opportunity. By keeping the 10 Ps in mind right now, it will help us in the Pacific to align, cooperate, and focus on reframing the future of travel. I think this is the time for the human race to step up and be better. We're all in this together. We have to focus on safe travels, and we have to build back better. If you still need more help, feel free to contact one of us, share your stories. And I'm going to end up with a quote and then quickly show you the resource slides. The Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones. It ended when alternative options opened up for humanity. Now bring me that horizon. Thank you so much. That's the resource slide for helpful links to all the wonderful BLP webinars and also the stories of our clients. And again, this is the additional resources for critical questions as well as crisis leadership tips. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today, and I hope to see you on the 6th of August. BLP, thank you very much for creating this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Belinda. So many amazing resources there. And just to let everybody know, we'll make Belinda's presentation slides available to everybody as well, so you can download them and read them and click through those links in your own time. Thank you all again the majority of the people here have stayed 15 minutes over time. We really appreciate it. And we will send the recording of the webinar out to everybody after this is completed, and it'll be on our website as well in our webinar section in case you needed to leave early. Belinda, thank you again so much for sharing your specialized expertise with us today. Thank you for waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning, 4 a.m. in the morning in South Africa today to do this presentation, and all the meetings that we've had very early in the morning to get this ready. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to your next presentation on the 6th of August. Our next webinar next week will be presented by Kevin Fort. He's the founder of Regenerative Business Institute, and he'll be presenting a two-part webinar, one part next week on resilience through cooperation. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today, and we'll see you again same time, same place next week. Goodbye.